while we're waiting for Maya. My name is Riikka Theresa Innanen. I am a Kundalini yoga teacher. I'm a coach. My background is in arts, a dancer, choreographer, filmmaker, installation maker, teaching arts at the university as well. And I'm also have a background in asylum rights activism. So that's where I come from. And hopefully soon, yes, we have also Maya here so that we can talk together. Hi.
Hi.
Yes. So
Hi, everyone.
yeah, so we're talking here for a while, and please tell us where you're coming from, where you're joining in, who you are, and also if you have any questions, we try to be able to monitor them and answer. Sometimes they pass by too fast, but we'll try to include those into our conversation. Let me see if I can add a little bit of light. Go on, Maya, it's all yours now.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name's Maya. I live in Montreal, Quebec, in Canada, in a nice, giant, cold place for half the year. So we're entering that dark, cold time right now. It's not my favorite, but it presents interesting challenges, spiritual challenges. I'm a writer of many stripes. I have a background in different forms of activism and community organizing, and Indigenous solidarity activism specifically here in Quebec. I was too hunched over my desk for too many years freelancing, and yoga was the only counterbalance that I had, and so I ended up eventually finding Kundalini yoga as a perfect way of releasing old trauma, dealing with anxiety, dealing with just my body armoring, all sorts of things, and that's where I've met my co-host Riikka, and that was how Rebellious Awakening Live Talks was born. So I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. If I can get. Somehow my lighting is really odd today, but yeah. So we both studied with Salima at the Yoga Vision. We had last week Salima talking with us, and I think it has a very unique way, very unique approach to Kundalini yoga, or generally, if we think about traditions that are based on hierarchy, where you have a teacher, you have a lineage that should be respected and honored. And yeah, you yourself have an interesting connection to what it means that, and yes, we're always drawn to people who can catalyze or empower our transformation, they tend to be charismatic people. They tend to be it's a process where we are very delicate. So it's very touch and go, and at the same time, we, like I said, it's at the same time, while we are embarking on this journey where we're very vulnerable, we also want to honor the lineage that we're learning from, so that we might not actually even have tools to navigate that if it's not from our own cultural background, like in our, well, your case is not, but my case is that Kundalini yoga is not at all from my cultural background. So yeah, tell me.
Yeah, well, there's a lot there. I was drawn to study with Salima and Yoga Vision specifically because her approach was different from others that I'd seen, and I think you can relate to this as well, where there's just there's been a lot of and it's not just in Kundalini yoga, I think in different types of yoga as well, where it's just taught differently. And in Kundalini specifically, I guess more militaristically is the word that's sometimes used, where there's a lot of like pushing through and forcing through sometimes maybe. Whereas Salima really has a very trauma-informed approach, one that really emphasizes the inner intuition that lives in all of us and which ultimately unites us. And my own story, I mean, well, I do have a personal story to share here. Our topic today is gurus, and so
Yeah.
I do have a personal story to share. But also, just quickly, also another thing that drew me to Salima Yoga Vision was because I had seen representations of Kundalini yoga around for years, and this is no judgment for anyone who is in that world and just kind of receives that differently. But for me, the turbans and the white clothing, well, Salima does dress in white, but a lot of like the more traditional garb really just didn't draw me, did not attract me. And I think that relates back to, and so to see Salima, a woman of Indian origin who did not cover her head and had a specific, very sensitive, trauma-informed approach, really, really spoke to me and drew me in. And I felt like, okay, I feel like I can be represented in this world as well. And so, so for me, where I'm coming from is that I grew up, I'm mentioning basically my origin story for how I have navigated the concept of gurus. So I grew up in a very white, very rural place in Quebec. And my father came from Suriname, which is a very small Dutch-speaking country in South America, colonized by the Dutch. And so, and his grandfather was originally from Punjab in India, which is just so happens to be where Kundalini yoga originated. I can't say that I was raised very much in touch with that culture or with Sikhism at all, but that is his and my ancestry. And so he was influenced by what he was influenced by back when I was a child, and he was received in a very specific way in our white, very rural world. People exotified him. I should mention, he was a self-proclaimed guru. Okay, so my father had the long hair, he had the long beard, he sewed his own clothes, he made meditation cassette tapes, and he had real live in-person followers because there was no internet back then coming to our house. And people were kind of, I want to say, yeah, they were really followers of his. And he thought of himself as a guru. And in theory, I agreed with almost everything my father said. He was all about, respecting all walks of life and what he liked to call universal truth. And it was all about love and peace and truth and harmony and understanding. And of course, I would never disagree with that, even to this day. But because he was my father, I kind of knew who he really was. And I was the oldest child in my house. And my father and I were basically at war for my entire childhood because he was unfortunately a very abusive parent. He was unfortunately not living by his own ideals, and no one outside of the family really saw that, at least not at first. And so I had this really kind of, and it was a very, very difficult upbringing for me, very traumatic. And he was quite a violent person. And so for me, I had this was my introduction to this idea of guru, and it was just completely wrapped up in like this idea of deep hypocrisy. Yeah. So it's funny. So I entered Kundalini yoga with a lot of humor in my heart because it feels like a real calling to me. It really does. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, I need to also be the kind of teacher that I know I would like to have, and I think others would like to maybe have, and I love the and so, and of course there's this whole legacy of good and good and more problematic gurus all over yoga and in Kundalini yoga as well, but one of the things I love about Kundalini yoga is that it's of course very influenced by the Sikh faith. And the opening mantra, which I think you mentioned in one of your posts leading up to this, is all about acknowledging basically the inner guru, like the divine wisdom within that connects us all. And I love this reminder. I always tell my students, this is ultimately, even though, in Sikhism, there's also a belief in external gurus and teachers. There's also this very much this coexisting belief in this inner guru, and for me, this really means that, and what I like to remind my students of, is that there is no one human being and no one guru that is more inherently equipped than everyone else to access that deep inner wisdom and that intuition that goes with it, and the authority to act on that. And so we all have that potential. So that's one of the most beautiful things to me about the opening mantra in Kundalini. And so I think that while we're all just human beings flailing about trying to find our way through, it is worth thinking about what if we are someone who's drawn to gurus, or if we are someone who identifies as a guru. I think it's worth giving it thought and reflecting here and there. And I think that there are. I'm definitely not judging and definitely not making any general statements, because I think there's a lot of amazing gurus out there, and people think of them in different ways, define them in different ways as well. The word, of course, meaning dispeller of darkness, someone who sheds light on darkness. So anyway, I don't know if you have any thoughts based on all of that. I can say more, of course, but initial thoughts. I
just wanted to say hello to Shaliza. She's actually co-runner of the Yoga Vision. Bonjour. And Shaliza is an amazing mentor, and she's actually one of the very important parts of this whole trauma-informed streak in the Yoga Vision education. There's a lot of and our topic today is gurus, and there's a lot to be said in the way that there's something very valuable in being handed down or guided through a process like there's an ancient wisdom that has been passed down generations after generations after generations, and it's been tested through that practice. And but I think also there's a world that has changed. There's also difference between the patriarchic hierarchy, and then what does the lineage of the what would be if we start looking at guru from a female point of view or a feminist point of view, how does that work? And following a guru is not exclusive for yoga or meditation or spiritual practices. It's in many religions, it's in politics, it's in our lives. And it's an interesting question, like why do we want to give ourselves? I mean, maybe it's connected to this deep desire to for devotion, to give our lives or do practice something, whether it's our work or our spirituality or whatever, to do it for a higher cause, for something larger than greater than us, and also for a community that stands for our values. And then it's a question of like, where does it go wrong? Where does that sweet spot flip into losing our agency, losing our ability to think clearly, losing our ability to be responsible for our own, what happens to ourselves, but also what happens to others, and maybe also this courage of calling out when things are not going right, and also maybe this whole thing about the guru. If we go to some places like in India or Tibet, then it is the point that you are supposed to follow your guru blindly, because they are not a human being, they are an incarnation of enlightenment. And so there's a lot of cultural miscommunication, I believe, when it comes to West, and how particularly West white people want to follow a leader rather than understanding the maybe larger cultural context of that.
Yeah, I think all of that is very, very true. And of course, and there's definitely the cultural aspect. There's a huge, perhaps maybe a rift in ways of thinking about things or ways of understanding gurus, but also, of course, within the East, if we want to say the East and the West, I mean, of course, there are probably there's probably not a homogenous understanding or experience of gurus in the East as well. You know, there's probably people are humans after all, and
Yeah.
so as far as we know, anyway. And so for me, I've thought about a lot about what draws people to gurus, and I think that there's something so beautiful, especially when you start bringing up women gurus. I feel that there's something so, and I understand it better then. For some, I guess that's just my own background, my own makeup, what draws me, and I understand it. I mean, I understand it makes so much sense for us as human beings to access knowledge that's being handed down. It's like when you're in a corporate environment, we would call it institutional knowledge, and that's really important. So just having someone who's been there, who's in touch with, why wouldn't we? Why would we just go blindly into Googling something? Why would we not want to learn from a real human being who's connected to other real human beings? That makes perfect sense to me. At the same time, and I really understand that myself, and I really feel like in many ways our teacher Salima is somewhat of a guru in a really lovely and beautiful way. But I'm not sure if she would choose that word herself. But of course, others may define guru in a stricter way. But for me, I feel like there's this thing that happens when it does go wrong, where we as human beings, we crave knowledge, and we crave wisdom, and we crave something larger than ourselves, and all of that makes sense. But something we also often get really attached to is this idea that this like need for formulas, like for things to, you know, for like this kind of a formula that works for all things or all people. Or it's very different. We're such a diverse lot, like us human beings. We're all so different. We have such different experiences and backgrounds and needs and inner mechanisms, but we still are attached as on the whole as a race of humans to sorry, there was a call there, to basically finding the formula, finding the protocol that works all the time in a specific situation. And when in reality, we're all case by case basis all the time. And that's what it needs to be, but it's not as convenient and it's not as efficient. And you see this in the world at large in corporate business, but you also see it, unfortunately, in the spiritual world. And it does happen. And so I think that's where it can sort of get dangerous in terms of when this following of a guru sort of becomes replaces our own ability to discern a little bit, like, because ultimately, and the ironic thing is that for me anyway, Kundalini yoga is so much about, like, when you follow it to its heart, is so much about learning how to discern, learning to tap into your own intuition, learning to listen to your own inner voice. So to me, I feel like there must be a real disconnect that sometimes happens where the protocol is being followed, the formula is being followed, something very deep is being felt, but the discernment is blocked somehow. And so we are complicated beings. So it's worth unpacking and thinking about, because once we unpack and think about that, there's so much more room to just move freely into actual knowledge and wisdom and inner guidance yeah, I mean, no one's a perfect student and no one's a perfect teacher. And I think maybe that's at the heart of just remembering who we are as humans. There's it's just an interesting thing. I think a lot about the addiction to formula and the addiction to certainties that we as humans have.
Yeah, definitely. This lure, or in the comfort of just being able to hang your brain, leave that outside and just not having to worry about your life or your choices anymore. It sounds very yeah, it's very comfortable in, especially in a world that might be confusing, or if you've been hurt, or if you don't deep down trust yourself with your own choices. And I do believe that it can be a type of person that gets drawn to gurus, is that you don't trust yourself, that you made some serious mistakes in the past and you just don't really trust yourself. And then when somebody says follow me and you'll be fine, that's like, okay, finally I'm safe. It's almost like one of the hierarchies in, like, I'm safe now I can actually yield and be, you know, to the world, and open myself and not, and be the person I always wanted to be, outside this fear that has been stifling my spirit. And then there's something that, you know, there's a beautiful way of saying in the Christianity that Jesus was incarnated into a human. He's the God of the Son who became a human, and that means that you are human. And I believe that even in with gurus, if you incarnate into humanity, into a human body, you are a human with all the vices and virtues of a human. And one of the vices is that power corrupts. If you have power over people, it does things to you. It does affect your ability to feel empathy, um, to understand the value of the experience of the other person, that they are not just dirt, but they are actually equal human beings. Human rights kind of just leave the scene, and that in that way. So
Yeah,
allowing other
yeah.
people to have that power is also problematic.
Oh, sorry, what did you mean by the last part?
Well, in a way that if we give ourselves to somebody to completely lead us, we are as much kind of
Of course.
responsible for the this
Yeah.
kind of the imbalance of what happens there. Or
Yes.
if we can
Um,
witnesses that is happening, and people are doing bad things for other people, it is a problem when people don't intervene.
mhm. Of
Allow that
course,
to
not deciding is still a decision, and yeah,
happen.
it's and the whole thing about power corrupting it, it just never ceases to amaze me how, I mean, we use the word power, right? And we often think about power in terms of, well, I mean, political power, there's personal power, though, which is very different. And in the context of gurus, it's funny because I really feel like, true power would be, if you have students or who are vulnerable, would be to then the true power would be to instill power and empower others. But so often, possibly because we're all here to learn, including many of the gurus walking the earth, it unfortunately power can become corrupted within us as well. And that is when there's a bit of a preying on more vulnerable people rather than an empowering of, and like a lot,
Mm.
passing the power on kind of thing, um, which I think is one of the great powers of Kundalini yoga, to kind of pass the power on and like
Mm-hmm.
just remind people of their own power, which is, yeah, there's a lot of, just as with many religions in the world, there's a kind of a little bit of irony going on with regard to the beauty and the potential of it all, and how we sometimes as humans just kind of miss the point a little bit. But then it's all a learning process. So
Mm-hmm.
it's all, here we are today talking about it because it's all a learning process. And
Mm-hmm.
here we are
Mm-hmm.
sharing this mortal coil talking about,
Yeah.
guru experience. Yeah.
Yeah. So just to tell people who just joined us that I'm Riikka and this is Maya, and we are Rebellious Awakening Conversations. We are talking about these things every week with different topics. Our interest is to see how our background in activism and art kind of connects to spiritual growth and Kundalini yoga. And today we're talking about gurus. And But what do you, I've there are some even current gurus who say that us who have not been learning through them or similar to them, that we are kind of not, that it doesn't really, like it doesn't count, or that we are now true followers of Kundalini yoga, for example, or any kind of Indian tradition. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, there are also many people out there who question the existence of Kundalini yoga within the yoga tradition as well, right? Question the origins of that. There's a lot of different types of questioning and different types of conversations and complicated controversies to be had within Kundalini yoga and yoga in general. But I would personally, my response to that would just be that for me, I have to listen to my body above any other external human telling me what I should or shouldn't be doing. And the fact for me is that Kundalini yoga is the most healing practice I have found, and it's been the same thing for almost everyone I have had the honor of teaching so far in my very, very short time. It's just an incredibly potent and powerful medicine, and it's an honor to learn it and an honor to pass it on. And I think we need to do so respectfully and transparently by sharing as much as we can about its origins, about its influences, and all of that. I think that is non-negotiable for me and should be for other teachers as well. But for me, the reality is that we're living in a completely globalized internet tech Aquarian era, whatever you want to call it, and arguably there's never been more of a widespread need for these teachings than there is right now. You know, people are suffering in so many different ways. Just every single possible way people are suffering, and we need these practices. And so unfortunately, I think that it's not really realistic. I mean, maybe in some cases, if it's accessible to people to have direct access to gurus that they feel good about studying with, then they absolutely should. But for most people, I think access is really important, and for most people, that looks like accessing it online, or that looks like accessing it with a teacher close to them, or that looks like accessing it through books. And I think that that being said, there is something important to remember where some people, you know, we have to be careful when we're accessing teachings without a teacher. We have to be very careful because, like I said, this is a potent medicine, and it does take discernment. And there are because we are humans and because our experiences are so diverse, this is no exception. There is no formula. So some people will find these teachings on their own, maybe go too hard, too fast, too forcefully on their own, and not really understand, not really embody like the spirit behind them. So I think whenever possible, even if you're not following a guru per se, finding a really good teacher, at least to guide you in the beginning, is whether online or in person, is important. At least someone who's been there before that you connect with. I think that's important. But what do you say to people who make that statement about gurus and lineages, and how, you know, how we shouldn't necessarily access it if we're not going that route?
Yeah. Well, there is the horizontalization of information is definitely a threat to the power hierarchy and turf wars, and who does it the right way. You know, we know both of us have the knowledge from behind, you know, from the kitchen, what the guru life actually is. It can be actually quite petty in a way of like about power struggles and turf wars, and it is a very different world than it was for example 50 years ago, for sure. But then there's something that connects also what I meant before with the kind of female empowerment or the feminist action, that it is more horizontal. It is more a circle. It's more like we sharing knowledge and guiding each other. Maybe somebody's, and I don't think it's, in that sense, we are not all the same. There are people who are more experienced, and I do think that Kundalini yoga is one of those practices that it's very important to have a good teacher whenever possible. Or actually, it should be like, you shouldn't, you should have somebody good to teach you, and especially if you are online, then to be very mindful about not going too fast, too hard. And I do feel it's almost my way of giving back that what I have received as a healing medicine. It's my duty to pass it on to the next person, not in a guru way, but as a way of, like, like you said, there's so much that needs to be healed, and I do feel that we have a moment of change. We have to change. It is really a sink or swim situation. If we do not heal, if we do not change on the societal level, then our species will not survive, for sure, like totally for sure. So it is a sink or swim situation, and that requires the horizontalization of information so that it can spread as fast, as wide as possible, which is completely against the idea of there's one guru and the secret teachings that are only for those who have show that we don't have, as species, we don't have the luxury anymore to go that route. We need to empower as many people as quickly as we can, so that we can heal ourselves and then heal the world and change this mechanism and this paradigm that is very dysfunctional and frankly suicidal.
I agree 100%. Yeah. And
But then I also
not just suicidal,
think,
but sorry.
just to end up that, but I do think that it can be a gateway, that maybe somebody starts with me and then they want to go and study with somebody higher guru, and that's fine. Go on. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No. That's it's all perfectly on point. And I was just going to say, not just suicidal, our trajectory, but and going along with that, like very apocalyptic, like very straight line narrative. And I think about this sometimes, how we're kind of perhaps in keeping with what I mentioned earlier about our addiction to formulas and wanting uncertainty and all of that. This is partly why we need to heal so badly now, because of that. So we're kind of stuck on this like narrative where things are like a straight line almost, but then straight line cuts off and things end. It's like apocalyptic, it's suicidal. Whereas I like to think of it as an opposing thing to the opposite being a spiral, an upward spiral, that where we can kind of keep going, learning the same lessons perhaps over and over, but in more depth each time. And then we, it's not a circle. It's not quite a circle, but it's circular and it goes in more depth. And I like thinking about it that way. But I agree that it's really sink or swim right now. The healing it's kind of like the need for it has reached a boiling point. It's beyond description, really, where we're at right now. And that's why I think that this healing as activism idea is just so, to me, it's like so pertinent. It's so, this idea of healing as self-justice, which then has a ripple effect outward. And when we're able to heal ourselves, we're then able, the people around us in our world, our family, our friends, the people that we make contact with, they're all affected by that shift in energy, and we can spread that outwards. Even if we're not directly teaching, it's so important, that it's so imperative.
Yeah. When I started Kundalini yoga, my family was saying, whatever you're doing, don't stop, because something very important changed. And it changed the whole family dynamics, and that was it was literally my experience as well. Yeah.
It's definitely helped me be less rough with myself, gentler with myself, more patient with others, and and just, less kind of automatically internalizing all the horrific things in the world that are happening,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
we don't want to do because we want to live to fight another day or live to bring peace another day. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing that came to my mind, also connected to activism, is this gurus connected to the truth, the one truth or the dogma. And just my experience, and still today, it really saddens me that there's a very harsh hierarchy of truths, and I, at least in my experience as activist, is like it wasn't that we're all fighting for the right cause. That wasn't enough. You had to fight for it in the right way, and if you did it in a different way, or then that was considered soloism, or the wrong way, or not pure, or like somehow it had the element of purity in a strange way. And at some point I said, like, I never found more hierarchical system or bunch of people than anarchists, because
Oh my
maybe because
God.
there were no existing structures, we had to self-organize, which kind of brought not the best out of us. So in some ways, structures can actually have a beneficial kind of, I'd like to talk about choreography, so that when we're kind of organized and we can move choreographed, we actually end up bringing the best out of us, rather than focusing on internal relationships and the hierarchy between us, kind of at the pecking
Yes.
order. And still
Yes, I agree.
today, people not coming to me and asking, like, what actually happened? Like, what's your side of the story? But just taking the truth out from the so-called guru, or the one that is kind of the thought authority, to take that as a kind of value, and then never circling back and asking, like, what's going on? Are you okay? Like, I really, like, it's just the most human thing to do. It's just go like, hey, what's going on? We've gone through a lot of things, and I know you really well, and it doesn't sound like you, but is this really true? So that's a kind of maybe a different version of the guru, or maybe the right, that there is a, like, how to say, a set thing that is right, or somebody else. There's somebody who decides what is right and wrong, and then everybody else is kind of just following that,
Yeah.
despite not so nice things happening around.
Yeah, well, again, it's this like need for a formula, and I've seen this in the activist world as well. I'm laughing because it's like it's I'm laughing because I've been involved in some amazing groups of activists in the past who, not even necessarily anarchists, maybe some here and there, but for me, and I've ended up joking with some of my friends over the years because it's like some corporate environments that I've seen and encountered have more mechanisms in place for accountability than some of these activist milieus, simply because, okay, and I love the idea. It's very beautiful to have this idea of non-hierarchical functioning, and I'm very much all about the horizontal sharing. I really think this is important, and I think that thinking about this concept of the future as female, not to be gender essentialist in any way, but it is interesting to think about how these shifts might happen going forward and what new structures might take form. But yeah, in the activist world that I know, there's very much, like, understandably so, I guess, like a real kind of like a repulsion to any structure, and kind of and it's one thing to not have one leader setting the rules or setting what's right or setting what's wrong, but we ultimately do need some kind of system in place ultimately. And so the question then becomes, otherwise there's just no way to hold anyone accountable when someone goes off the rails and is harming others or something like that, right? Then the whole group just gets derailed and we don't know what to do, and we're just like, what do we do? And there's just, and because no one wants to oppress anyone else, people just become paralyzed. paralyzed sometimes. And so some kind of system is necessary in life. And so I'm really curious because it feels like we're at a real tipping point or in the world right now, as you said. And I feel in my heart of hearts that new systems are being built even as we speak, and new ways of, seeing and understanding the world. And I can only guess where we will be leadership wise and system wise in a couple of years, and how that might shift balance wise from a select group of men telling people what's right or wrong to whatever may be coming. It's exciting and scary to think about.
It's an opportunity, and it's also definitely there's an element of threat in it, but it's an opportunity. And as talking about as humans as species, we tend to not act until the negatives of the situation weigh enough. Then when it's too painful, then we actually do something. And I hope we don't have to go really to the deep end, but who knows. There's also something very interesting, which is a complicated issue, is cross-pollination, in a sense that if you think about gurus, there's the pureness of the teaching, and with the Kundalini yoga being actually something that came from an ancient tradition, maybe also a secret tradition, then a male-dominated tradition, and then coming to West, becoming an open tradition, and also very much female-led tradition. There's something very potent about it. It's something very interesting about it, and very controversial at the same time. And I've seen this in arts, that there's this whole problematics of copyrights and not appropriating things, but at the same time, arts and ideas have always grown from cross-pollination, from being inspired by something and taking it and then doing your own version of it. And there's something inherently paralyzed as well when we get stuck with this not allowing, but at the same time, we're again here like, what do you think about that?
Well, I think overall we as humans, and now especially in the era where everything is globalized and everything is visible to everyone, I think that we are just naturally cross-pollinators, and so things have the crisscrossing has just been exponential and endless over the generations, and I feel like it's just speeding up more and more now. And for me, I mean, and this is definitely true of all yoga as well, among many other practices, but yoga probably is a special case because it's so helpful to so many people, and people want to take that into their world. They want to integrate it, even when they don't necessarily know everything about it or understand where, or maybe even when they don't necessarily understand that it's about more than movement, that it goes deeper, that it's a spiritual practice. And so there are a lot of problematic ways of cross-pollinating and of passing on teachings and all of that. I personally don't know. At the same time, I also think it's very positive for as many people as possible to be exposed to these understandings of self as possible, as quickly as possible in this time. So for some people that means, and nobody can really stop all problematic cross-pollinations, as we're calling it, from occurring. But what we can do, in my opinion, is just try to educate and embody, if we're teaching, for example, as respectfully educate as much as possible. So pass on as much knowledge as we can, ask the right questions. There's a real, and maybe it's just too much looking at social media for me right now in 2024, but there's a real decline in there's a simultaneous rise of deep and beautiful and profound intelligence in human beings, and a real simultaneous decline in people's critical faculties and ability to discern. And there's like a real tension going on right now. And so I think that for me, the best way, I mean, people are gonna, if they're tired or stressed or their muscles are tense or whatever, they're gonna find whatever form of yoga. It's this massive industry at this point, and I'm very, very, very on the side of those who point out all the problematic things about that, and unpacking who wellness is for, and unpacking the commercialization of it, and unpacking the colonial roots it has all taken, the colonization of the practice, the suppression of it. All of this is so deeply important to me, and I wish that I could pack all of that information into every yoga class, but the best that I feel I can do right now is to insert it wherever I can, instill each practice with that spirit, and then invite conversation wherever possible. And like we're doing right now, and in life, and in any conversation that I have. And I think that these conversations are happening in the so-called wellness world, the so-called yoga industry as well. And change is not always rapid, even when it needs to be. I do feel like more rapid changes are coming. It's just what I feel in my gut. But yeah, what about you? What do you say to that question about that you just posed me about?
I don't even remember, but
I don't remember the
what
exact
reminded me of
phrasing.
the colonialization, or even or appropriation, even of the word guru. That you got your internet gurus to your
Yeah,
carpet
yeah.
fitting gurus to, like, everybody's a guru, and what does a guru mean? And yeah, there's of course the idea of a bringer of the light into the darkness, and but teacher or a leader or all that is important. But then definitely if we look at, like you were saying, that we need to be more discerning, while we're actually it's getting harder to be able to discern with the social media, definitely. And yeah, there's this whole idea of, like, when the thing does not have substance and it's all about the external bendiness and the body, like we're all talking about looking fit, or like I just listened to one podcast saying that not just women have body dysmorphia at the moment from a very early age, but even men are having more, like there's an epidemic of body dysmorphia. And so how can we actually be a counterbalance? And in that sense, it's good to have more different types of content online, so that people can find a little, when they just are crippled with anxiety and body dysmorphia, and saying, like, you can just come here, you can sit, you can do this movement if it feels good to you, or you can just be here and vibe with us, and it's okay. I think it's really, really, really important. And that's yeah, in that sense, it's a soft form of activism, in a way of saying, like, you're okay. But it is a bit of a deafening scene. It's very loud, and it's very, very sad that the amount of time that our reality is now so much externalized from us, that it's nothing like, and that's the weight, I think, of the type of practices that we do in Kundalini yoga. But it could be maybe Tibetan meditation, or it is from another culture, but it gives us stronger tools to come back to ourselves and have our life experience, our emotions from within, from inside, rather than just having it all happening outside, not even outside of us in the world, but on a screen that is completely virtual. So it is very, very important to bring that in, and just saying that, okay, we are in the same place, we're in the same environment, but this can help you to go inwards and feel how you really feel, and come home to yourself. And maybe if I think about the gurus, that's something that I tend to lack in most gurus, is the permission to be me, to the permission to say that you are your guru, you have the wisdom, trust your own intuition, your sensation. There is of course a whole world of Maya that can be distracting, but still you need to learn to trust yourself. And most gurus do not say that.
No, I think it's true, and I think I think that might change. I think that the direction we're heading in, while it does feel like things might get worse before they get better. I don't like to throw this phrase around, but it is kind of this feeling of excitement, but also a little bit of dread that I've been harboring in my gut these days, just for human happenings. But yeah, I do think that what needs to happen through Kundalini yoga or through Tibetan meditation, through whatever it is that we're passing on, whatever it is that helps us go from performative to from screen external to help us look inward, whatever it is, that we may be ushering in, and I hope we are ushering in, and I feel we are ushering in an era of where, this idea of guru, whether we continue to use that word or not, but this idea, it goes from very much changes from top to bottom to horizontal, as you mentioned earlier, or to maybe even to circular. I don't know exactly what the structure will look like, but I do think that championing one another's intuition needs to be, and one's inner guidance needs to be the way of the future, because doing the opposite has got us where we are now, where we see ourselves as separate from nature, where we see ourselves as separate from the earth, where we see ourselves somehow as our destinies as separate from our individual destinies as separate from the collective destiny, which is all leading us to where we are, has led us to where we are, rather. And so, again, I think that with the right spirit we can create shifts and make change, and it's just it's really just about growing that energy as much as we possibly can in whatever way we can, while still taking care of ourselves. And for me, it actually like teaching the Kundalini yoga for me it's been fascinating for me, because I've found that even when I'm very stressed and my nervous system is on high alert and all of that, even just like teaching others brings me back down, brings me back to myself. So it's been a very interesting, it's a good for me too. So it's been a very interesting process. I'm very thankful to be having these conversations with you.
Yeah.
Important.
Yeah. Just one thing that came to my mind, it's this again, and maybe this means I'm starting to think that whenever there's a paradox, it must be some truth in it. Instead of saying that it should be tossed away. Again, there's a paradox between this, that trusting my intuition, championing your intuition and your experience, and at the same time using the mind to understand the glitches of the mind, learning to understand that what I'm feeling is maybe not the objective truth in the situation, or maybe not a truth at all. It's a really interesting paradox in a way. Like, at the same time, the only way we can change things is that we champion each other's truth and agency, sovereignty. Yes. But at the same time, each one of us has to kind of realize and say, like, okay, I'm doing this practice to understand what kind of tricks my mind is doing to create all kinds of hormonal situations that I'm completely convinced that I'm very, very pissed off right now. How can I take distance to that and just understand what is really going on? And it's just an interesting balancing act, or a process. Maybe everything is, like you said, it's like a spiral. Like, okay, I'm here, but So yeah, it's very important to talk about these things, and also to just mention that we are both of us are aware of both the HBO series, but also about the legacy of Yogi Bhajan, and I think it's a complicated. I think we are very much wanting to throw him under the bus and say that he was a bad man, but the story is probably a little bit more complicated and complex. And if we go into karma and into maybe that there is some kind of a reason to everything, I'm not to say that anybody's experience, as you, Maya, very well know, when it's shit, it's really terrible. It can be very traumatic, and it's terrible when gurus do bad things. But there's just something very interesting now in the fact that Yogi Bhajan, being an corrupted person as he was, actually frees the actual practice from worshipping him as a guru.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And it's, you know, I really think that as human beings, one of our greatest superpowers is the ability to hold paradox. I mean, the main, like, the world that we're existing in right now, the one where critical faculty might be on a decline among some, and where, like, understand there's a tension between this growing, beautiful, deep, profound intelligence and this declining ability to discern. I feel like there's ultimately at the heart of that this need for us to embrace nuance and paradox and uncertainty, and, you know, uncertainty being I'm the last person that's ever going to, you know, excuse any type of behavior of a predator or of a problematic guru, an abusive guru. I grew up with a father who was very much, Yogi Bhajan reminds me of my own father, I'm not going to lie. But anyway, and I have to laugh about it, but ultimately we really do need to be able to embrace paradox, because for me, I'm embracing this idea that yes, we're going into our intuition and our inner truth, but this is our own inner truth is not the be all end all. We are a part of something larger, and we embrace this idea that we don't know everything, that we are part of something larger, that we are not the end of knowledge. So for me, that includes holding this paradox that someone with real human problems, someone who's done a lot of harm, can both be condemned for that, while at the same time we understand that they unleashed something really positive in the world. And that's just how, you know, that's humanity for you.
Yeah. That's definitely yeah. We are creatures of paradox and contradiction, and maybe that's maybe something to understand in following somebody or learning things from a person, is that they are humans and they are not perfect.
No, exactly. And once we can, and also I feel like knowing that and really internalizing that others cannot be perfect, while still appreciating some of the things they're offering, can also help us to appreciate ourselves more and be in touch with the reality of who we are more, and appreciate ourselves without holding ourselves to these crazy standards of perfection, which don't really exist as well. Facilitating self-love.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's an important conversation. I really think
it is.
Yeah.
It is. It is, and I really appreciate that you're you know, you don't have to you didn't have to share your personal history because it's not an easy past. It's but it stands the testament that you have become empowered, and maybe it's made you even more aware how important it is to discern, and made you a powerful voice of a powerful teacher, because you have seen it. It's not an abstract concept. that gurus can use their power wrong, but you are a survivor and you're a thriver. You've thrived, maybe not just despite of it, but also it's taught you a lot of important, not nice lessons. Could have been without them, but
and therein lies the paradox as well, right? Horrible things that happen to us also can sometimes birth beautiful things as well.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing this human experience with me, Riikka.
Thank you. And see you next week.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know we have a beautiful topic. Sorry?
11 your time and 6 o'clock my time.
Yes, exactly. And we'll send out word about that beforehand. And thank you all for listening.
And you were saying that we have a beautiful topic. What's our topic next week?
Well, I was trying to remember the proper wording for what we decided on. And it was around gender, wasn't it? And identity.
Yeah.
I think we need to we'll formulate it properly and send it out.
Exactly. But I think it's this a little bit the same way of like how we are entering a different era where this very important and powerful work of the feminine and the masculine, it needs to grow. I don't think it's wrong. I definitely feel very strong that these powers of masculine and feminine, but it needs to expand. I do feel that the conversation needs to expand, and myself as a kind of, I would say, self-identifying two-spirit person, it's interesting to hold those polarities and also how that then connects to spiritual growth and identity, and how identity politics also play into it, and
all of that.
all of that,
yeah.
and the
all
eternal
of that
soul.
Thank
you. Take care.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye.